Look, I know it sounds crazy. The odds are against us, but could the Gophers actually win the Big Ten tournament?
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden
no matter what we're
Gophers,
going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
your daily podcast on the Minnesota
Whatever
Golden
turns out, however it
Gophers.
turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And today we're talking a whole lot of Gophers men's basketball. Could the Minnesota Gophers actually win the Big Ten tournament? I know the odds are small. It might be extremely doubtful, but I don't think it's as wild as some folks might try to make it. Then we're going to talk about what could happen with these final four regular season games for the Gophers and how it could play out. And finally, why, if the Gophers make the NIT tournament, it's not a completely bad thing. In fact, it's not a bad thing at all. The only thing would be you want to see the NCAA tournament, but it's still a positive if they get to the NIT. We're going to dive into all of that today. So if you love Golden Gophers, whether it be basketball, men's or women's, whether it be football, I really dropped the ball with hockey this year. I'm not going to lie to you. Me and Dylan Laux, our schedules got a little bit busy and not as intertwined this year, but I plan on hopefully getting a little bit more hockey talk as we get to the tournament and the playoff stages. We'll get to at least have a review or a recap or something. We got to get a little bit of hockey talk for the state of hockey. So if you love Gopher sports, be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Follow wherever you get the podcasts. Spotify, Apple Pods, Stitcher, you name it. You can find us over at Locked On Golden Gophers. And if you can't find us there, let me know. Send me a DM, tag me on Twitter, and I will have our team reach out to those platforms. Make sure we get there because we should be there already. Now, let's talk about Gophers basketball. The first thing we're going to talk about is, could the Gophers actually win the Big Ten tournament? Now, I know that sounds like a stretch. I know it sounds like a long shot, and it very well could be, but I don't think it is ridiculous. I don't think it is impossible. I think there is a chance the Gophers could make a run, not only because it is here in Minnesota where the Gophers have played really well here. Now, it won't necessarily be a home court advantage like it is at the barn, but being here, being in an easy access location for local fans, I think that there will be a good chunk of Gopher fans present at the game, and I think that can only play to their favor in this type of tournament. Now, the way you're looking at the Big Ten tournament right now, if you look at the percentages and the odds, it is very likely that the Gophers will finish with 7th or 8th in the Big Ten Conference. Now, my hope is 7th or higher, because not only do you finish in the top half of the Big Ten, which many people would not have given the Gophers heading into this season, myself included. I think I had them at the 10 or 11 range when it came to the high-end capabilities of their season finish. They're right there at 7th or 8th. If they finish in that 7th or 8th slot, that means you're going to play the 9th or the 10th slot in that second round after Weekling Wednesday. So let's just run with it and say if you play 9 or 10 in that first matchup, if you win that game, then you go on to face one of the top 2 seeds. If you were in that 8-9 game, then you go on to face the number 1 seed in the tournament. And if you were in that 7th slot playing the 10th seed and you win that game, you go on to face the 2nd seed in the tournament. So overall, you're going to have to play a big dog really quick. Now, what we've seen the Gophers play this number 1 seed already, and they gave them a run. Now, it didn't work out for them in the end, and it ended up pulling away in the last second, but Minnesota showed they can compete with a team like Purdue on the road, and in a neutral site that could skew a little bit in Minnesota's favor. Being here in Minnesota, that's a matchup you don't absolutely hate. Now, it's not one you want to see. In fact, you would love to not see that matchup until like a championship or something, but the Gophers have shown they can compete with that type of team, so that is good in its own right. Now, if you flip it to the other side, if you say you're the 7th seed, you beat your 10th seed, and then you move to the number 2 seed, that means you're very likely going to be playing Illinois. Now, Illinois doesn't have the 2nd seed locked down yet, but it's looking pretty good and favorable for them. But you would get a preview of that matchup tonight on the road again at Illinois. So in an unfavorable matchup, if the Gophers can play close with them or go on and beat Illinois tonight, that gives you a little bit more confidence heading into a neutral site game, which is not very neutral here in Minnesota at the Target Center. So both of those don't completely scare you. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to be hard. I'm not saying the Gophers would be favored to win or anything like that. But what I'm saying is we've seen this Gophers team compete with the best of them. There's only been one, maybe two games in this Big Ten schedule where you're like, they had no chance throughout the entire game. They looked bad. They weren't playing together and they weren't competitive with the team. And that was the most recent Nebraska game on the road. And that was the first game versus Iowa in Dinkytown. Outside of those two games, I think the Gophers have been in every single Big Ten opportunity, and they've brought it down to the wire in most of those games. And if a team is to pull away, it doesn't happen until the final 3 or 4 minutes, where all of a sudden it's going from a 3-point game to a 10-point game. So overall, the Gophers have shown they can keep up and they can play and they can scrap with any team in the Big Ten. The only team they haven't played thus far is Illinois, and they're going to play them tonight. So we'll get a good feel for that one. And tonight's game could be a preview of a potential third round matchup. Now, that is huge. That is awesome. But then you have to go on. And now let's say you get through a Purdue, you get through an Illinois in the third round. Your confidence has to be at an all-time high in that type of situation. And from there, anything could happen. So I think that the Gophers, although their route is unlikely, although it looks unfavorable, it isn't impossible. And that could be the Gophers' best shot at trying to get into the NCAA tournament, is with the automatic berth by winning the conference tournament. So if Minnesota can go and they can win this Big Ten tournament somehow, some way, against all odds here in Minneapolis at the Target Center, well, then I think the Gophers would find themselves easily with a one-way ticket in a hot hand into the NCAA tournament, which is the best way to go into the NCAA tournament. But that being said, it might not be likely, but there are still other opportunities, other ways to either see the NCAA tournament or why the NIT is not such a bad thing. We're going to talk about both of those today here at Locked On Golden Gophers. In fact, we're going to talk about what happens with these final 4 games and how could things play out. That's what's coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Game Time, because Game Time is the place to be when you want to find yourself with the best ticket in your location, whether it be a sporting event, music, comedy, theater events. Game Time has you covered, and they are saving you $100, an extra $100 to keep in your pocket. Right now, all users get $100 off when you use or when you buy the big game ticket with code VEGAS100. That's VEGAS 100. Now, Game Time is the only ticketing app that saves you the headaches. They take all the pressure and they give you complete peace of mind. That's my favorite thing about the buying experience when it comes to the Game Time app, because you can not only see the view from your seat, so you know if you got a good angle, you know if you got some random obstruction in your way, which is definitely something to keep in mind for concerts and things like that. But on top of that, they have all in prices, so you see your total up front. You know what you're getting, and you know it's a great deal before you get to the checkout. And on top of that, they make it super easy. It goes straight to your phone. You can get it in 2 taps, and you don't have to dig through emails or anything like that. So take the guesswork out of ticket buying with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off the big game ticket with code VEGAS100. That's VEGAS 100. Terms apply. Download Game Time today and use that code VEGAS100. Or if you're not going to the game, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about what if the Gophers win out? What happens with these final 4 games, and is it a possibility? Now, it's going to be tough, but the toughest matchup of those final 4 games is indeed tonight's game against Illinois, the final ranked team that the Gophers will play in the regular season on the road. And you know what? I think it's going to be a good test, a good indicator of how this season could finish out. Because if the Gophers go on to beat Illinois tonight, I think they will run the table with their final 4 games, plain and simple. I think that is how tough of an opponent Illinois is, and how much confidence and motivation the Gophers could take away from this game in order to get hot at the right time and try to carry throughout the rest of the season. Now, you've got Illinois tonight at 8 p.m., and then you take on 2 home games versus Penn State and versus Indiana. Now, if you look at the Gophers' last few home games, you've got Ohio State, which was a win, Rutgers, which was a win, Michigan State, which was a win, Northwestern, which is a win. The last home game loss was versus Wisconsin on January 23rd, in which we lost by 2 points. So the Gophers at home are a good bet. And the Gophers are also a good bet in general with an all-time series of 24-3 against the spread. And that is the best in college basketball. So the Gophers are not a team you want to count out in any given situation, especially when they're at home. So outside of that, the Big Ten schedule, the Gophers have won every single game at home except for that Wisconsin 2-point loss and then the Iowa game, which is what I told you was one of our worst losses of the season, the Iowa game and on the road at Nebraska. So overall, the Gophers have played very, very well at home, and hopefully they can keep that hometown feel, that home advantage when they go to the Big Ten tournament, which is here in Minnesota as well. If they can do that, I believe that they can compete and play with any single team in this Big Ten conference. But when you're looking at those final 4 games, I think they're going to pull off Penn State. I think they're going to pull off Indiana. I think they're going to find a way to stay hot at home. It comes down to Illinois and Northwestern, and both of those games quad 1 opportunities for the Gophers. And if they pull those off, you run the table and you get all 4 wins, then maybe there's a tiny chance, maybe there's a slight chance that the Gophers could get some love because they stayed in tight games with some of those other quad win games, because the Purdue game was tight and down to the wire, because the Wisconsin game was tight and down to the wire. That could add up to their favor if the committee and the selection committee wants to go and do it and look at, like, who's hot right now. If the Gophers finish on a 4-game win streak and win a bunch of games in the Big Ten tournament, they might be like, yeah, this Gophers team, they've given a lot of teams problems. They have good interior play. They have good guards. They have the leading assist man in the nation. There's a lot of talking points for this team, and they've been competitive throughout the entire process. And if they can finish off like that, I think that maybe they could have a case. Now, if they drop any of these next 4 games, I think that your ticket to trying to get a selection pick is done. I think you do not have any opportunities if you drop any of these final 4 games. And I think you're looking at an NIT opportunity, which is still something that could play out for the Gophers. Now, that is still a positive. We'll talk about that in a moment. But regardless, you have to win out all 4 in order to have any shot at a selection. And even then, it's pretty slim. But regardless of that, like I said, if we can get hot in the tournament, if you can go out and you just act like it's hometown, you act like you have that advantage, you carry that swagger about you, and you take every single one of these teams that you've been competitive with down to the wire and find a way to win, that is probably the Gophers' best bet at trying to get into the NCAA tournament. Now, when you're looking at how the Gophers could finish, like I said, it's likely that they'll finish in that 7th or the 8th seed. Right now, they're in the 8th seed because Iowa is 9-9. The Gophers are at 8-8. But that being said, Iowa has played 18 games in the conference, and so they only have 2 games left. And Minnesota still has 4 games left. So there's a lot of opportunity for Minnesota to pass Iowa as long as they win 2, maybe 3 of their next 4 games, which I said I think they'll win 2 of those home games. So if you can pull one of the 2 upsets, either Illinois or Northwestern, you likely jump Iowa in those seedings. Now, depending on how Michigan State does in their final games depends on if you can try to even get higher into the 6th seed, which would probably be more beneficial for the Gophers to try and get some momentum before having to take on a top seed in the tourney. Now, when you're looking at Michigan State's final stretch of the season, it's a tough one. They have to play at Purdue. They play versus Northwestern, which is a tough team to take even at home. And then they've got the road game at Indiana. Now, if they lose 2 of those games, Minnesota could very well put themselves in the opportunity to pass Michigan State as well and try to get a top 6 seed in this NCAA tournament. And Wisconsin might be just out of reach unless they lose all of their games for the remainder of the season. So overall, I think the highest seed that the Gophers can finish in is that 6th seed, but it's not impossible to get there depending on how Michigan State does in their next couple games. But I think most likely the Gophers probably finish with that 7th seed above Iowa heading into the tournament and taking on the 10 seed. Now, who could play the 10 seed as this season kind of looks to shake out? Right now, it would be Penn State would finish in that 10 seed, but Maryland is right there as well. So either Penn State or Maryland. Now, Minnesota's going to see Penn State right here. If you can pull off another win, that's a good look as far as getting an opportunity to see that team before you get to the tournament relatively soon. Maryland, they haven't seen that team since January, so it could be a completely different type of team that the Minnesota Gophers would have to take on. And Maryland has gotten a lot better and a lot more positivity throughout the back half of their season, winning more games, building confidence on it. And Maryland has a team that has experienced players. Jameer Young is a dog. I'm spacing. Oh, Julian Reese is a dog. They have players who can get it done and can show up in tourney times. So the Big Ten tournament, maybe that's not a team you want to play. You want to play the younger team, the more inexperienced team, the team with a new coach like Penn State. And so I think the Gophers probably would hope for that matchup. Or if an Ohio State could somehow find a way to sneak in there, maybe you see Jamison Battle again in the tournament. Overall, probably not. Probably looking at Penn State or Maryland, but regardless, either one of those teams is a team that the Gophers could beat in that second round of the Big Ten tournament. And then you move on to play the number 2 seed, most likely, which would be Illinois, or depending on how it finishes out, could be Northwestern. Again, a team you will see late in the season and have a feel for prior to the tournament, and maybe how to address and get yourself back into the opportunity to pull off a big upset. So the Gophers are in a fine position. Those are the different scenarios in which things could happen in these final 4 games. I think overall, you're most likely going to see Minnesota win 2 to 3 games of these final 4 games. That probably takes them out of the selection type of team for the tournament. And that means you have to win the Big Ten tournament. Otherwise, you're looking at an NIT experience in 2023-24. Now, the NIT is not a bad experience for the Gophers. I'm going to tell you why it's a very positive thing to close up today's show coming up next. First, let's talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because if you have not heard it yet, new customers can get an all-time deal over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And with the NBA in full swing getting ready for the playoffs, it's time to get buckets over at FanDuel. So right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. So if you go and you win your first bet of $5 or more, you're getting $150 in bonus bets to your account. That's easy, free money right there. And all you got to do is go and win your first bet, and you get that in the bank. And then you can bet on your favorite NBA players, your favorite NBA teams. You could look at the tournament, the NCAA tournament, and who you think is going to get hot, who could make the Final Four, who will get to the Sweet 16. All those and much more over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and shoot your shot with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, we have a shorter show for you here today, but I just wanted to dive into the men's basketball talk as we are approaching March, and we all know March is madness when it comes to college basketball. Now, even if the Gophers don't make it to the official March Madness NCAA tournament, getting into the NIT is not a bad thing. In fact, it is still a positive experience for this younger Gophers team. Now, yes, we have some older players on the team. We've got Dawson Garcia, who's older. Elijah Hawkins is experienced and older. Parker Fox is an older player. Isaiah Enan is an older player. You've got a lot of older veteran players. Now, nothing guarantees those players are back, but I'm pretty sure that every player on the roster has an opportunity to come back next season if they would like. They have eligibility to do it. The only one I am not fully sure on is Parker Fox. Now, Parker Fox is the energizer and motivator for this Gophers team, so that would be a tough loss if they lose him. But overall, I think that the Gophers have the opportunity to have a ton of returning production. So with returning production coming back next year, that means any sort of postseason play, any sort of run, any sort of extra time together and understanding what postseason play takes is pertinent. And so the NIT could be a good thing for the Gophers to get some postseason play. And if you can make a run, or you can go out there and win the whole dang thing, that only motivates you more for next season. And you bring more production, and you bring back guys ready to run it back next season and make a large splash, not only in the Big Ten Conference, but in the NCAA tournament where the Gophers should be. And I think that also can help with scheduling. Maybe you add a couple more resume building type games in the non-conference next season, so that way you can prove to folks this team is for real. We've been through it, and now we're going to prove it to you all season in 2024-25. So the NIT would be a good thing for the Gophers. You have a ton of youth on this team still. Pharrell Payne, Joshua Joseph, Braden Carrington, Cam Christie, who else is in there that I'm missing? Caden Betts. There's a lot of young players on this team that even if you can get them some experience in that NIT right now, that will carry for years to come in a team that has some postseason play experience, a team that has and knows that March is wild and madness, and that they can get a little bit under their belt so they can be best prepared for the real deal in the next season. So overall, the NIT would be a positive experience for these Golden Gophers, especially if they can bring people back. Now, people might be afraid that Dawson Garcia might not come back. People might be afraid that Cam Christie might not come back. I think overall, the biggest one that maybe wouldn't come back is Dawson Garcia because of how much he has proven. But if he's not getting the draft looks that he wants, if he's not getting the opportunities or the right projections when it comes to the NBA draft, then I think that he could possibly stay here and put on another big year like we've seen from Zach Edey or other players in the Big Ten Conference that just aren't getting as much love in the combine process and the NBA draft process. You come back, you continue to ball out, you get to over 20 points a game in the Big Ten Conference, and all of a sudden people are going to be like, okay, we got to pay attention to this kid. He's been a leading scorer in the Big Ten, a top scorer in the Big Ten, top 10 scorer for 3 years now, and now he's over 20 points a game. He can hit the three. He can play on the interior post. The game runs through him and his numbers continue to tick up. If he can go and do that, that starts to make people take notice. So I think Dawson Garcia, if he's not getting the looks he wants, would have an opportunity and a likelihood to come back and run it back with this team that he's been building a lot of brotherhood and loyalty with. Now, Cam Christie has NBA traits, has NBA type ability. That's plain and simple. I think his brother Max Christie left 1 year too soon. Now he left, he went to the NBA, he got drafted in the second round. All of a sudden he's playing the G League for his rookie year, and then he's slowly starting to get minutes now, and people are like, this Max Christie kid could be the real deal. Well, if Max Christie would have went back to Michigan State and been that missing piece and been their leading scorer and been the guy who can go out there and ball out, he probably could have worked his way into the first round, and all of a sudden he's getting the same type of minutes in year 2 that he would have saw in his rookie year had he just went back to college for 1 year. So maybe talking with his brother could maybe spur that to Cam Christie. Like, hey, look, you put the league on notice, you put the conference on notice. Now all of a sudden go out there and show them you're the dude, you're that guy, you're the real deal. Go out there and average better numbers. Go out there and be one of the best players in the entire conference. Go out there and win an accolade, all Big Ten team. And all of a sudden they're going to be kicking down your door looking to draft you. I think Cam Christie has NBA ability. I think he is going to be a Gophers NBA draft pick at some point in time, but I think he needs 1 more year, and I think that could do it for him. So I expect Garcia and Cam Christie to have very high likelihood to come back and play next season. Now, when it looks at the transfer portal for the Gophers, I don't think there's many players that I would be worried about leaving for the portal. It seems like there's a lot of good minutes and opportunities here for the Gophers. There's only 2 players on this roster with their minutes as of late that could maybe scare me when it comes to would they hit the portal, and that's Isaiah Enan, who is an older player, and I get it. If he wants to use his final year of eligibility at a place where he's going to get more opportunities, I do not blame him. I only cheer him on for what he has been through and gone through to get back to the court here in Minnesota. The other player is Joshua Joseph. Now, I'm hoping he'll stay it out. I'm hoping that he continues to work himself in and grind and fight and get himself back into that rotation and a key piece for the Gophers. But for a guy who was a starter for so many games, and then he was playing up 20-plus minutes for so many games, and now all of a sudden he's not really getting looks, I wouldn't blame him. I would understand it, but my fingers are crossed that him and Coach Ben Johnson are having discussions and they're having good heart-to-heart moments of his growth and how he can be a major factor for this team and why he should stick it out. I think those are big discussions to have both now and through the rest of the offseason. Hopefully his bond with his teammates keeps him here in Dinkytown as well, but I think the Gophers are set up for the most returning production, the most critical returners, and also the largest number of returners coming back for another year in the next season. So whatever tournament play they can get, NIT or NCAA, it only helps them advance even further next season, hopefully, and continue to build this program the right way. Now, that's going to do it for us here at Locked On Golden Gophers. I hope you enjoyed this show. Be sure to hit subscribe. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you ever have a question. If you ever want more different topics discussed here with Locked On Golden Gophers, I'll be sure to take notice of it down in the comments. I appreciate you all for listening. Row the boat, Sky, my Go Gophers, as always, and please don't forget to hit subscribe.